I'm 104 years old. I'll be 105 in July, if I make it that far. I'm telling you this because I've watched too many people I love forget their own names. I've watched them disappear while still breathing, and I need to say what I know while my mind is still mine. My daughter brought me here to this place. She calls it assisted living. I call it waiting, 3 years ago. I'm in a small room with a window that faces the parking lot. There's a woman down the hall, Margaret, who was a literature professor, taught at Berkeley for 30 years. Last week she asked me if I knew where her mother was. Her mother died in 1987. That's not going to be me. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if what I've learned matters. I didn't start out knowing any of this. When I was young, nobody talked about keeping your brain sharp. You just lived. You worked, you ate, you slept, you died. My father worked in a factory for 41 years. Came home, ate dinner, listened to the radio, went to bed. He was dead at 73. The last 2 years he didn't know who I was. I remember visiting him in the hospital. He looked at me like I was a stranger asking for directions. I said, "Dad, it's Joseph." He smiled politely, the way you smile at someone whose name you've forgotten at a party. I thought that was just what happened when you got old. I thought the mind wore out like knees or backs or hearts. I'm 104, and I can tell you what I ate for breakfast this morning. Oatmeal, blueberries, black coffee. I can tell you my phone number from 1965. I can tell you the name of every person in my family going back 4 generations. I can tell you the plot of the book I finished yesterday. This didn't happen by accident. When I was 37 years old, I worked as an accountant for a textile company in Philadelphia. There were 8 of us in that office. My desk was by the window. I worked with a man named Albert Lewinson. Albert was 59, brilliant with numbers, could do calculations in his head that took me 10 minutes with a pencil. Albert started forgetting things in the spring of 1959. Small things first. He'd ask me a question, I'd answer, then 5 minutes later he'd ask the same question. He'd leave files on his desk overnight when company policy said lock everything up. He started missing meetings. By December, they let him go. Gave him a gold watch and a handshake. I went to see him 2 years later. He was 61. He sat in a chair in his living room and stared out the window. His wife answered all my questions. Albert didn't say a word the entire visit. I don't think he knew I was there. I went home that night and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, that's going to be me. That's going to be me in 20 years. My wife Helen said I was being morbid. She said Albert had always been fragile, that I was stronger, that I worried too much. Helen was usually right about things, but not this. I started reading everything I could find about the brain. This was 1961, 1962. There wasn't much. Medical journals at the library. A few books. Most of it was technical, over my head. But I kept reading. I found one book, written by a neurologist in Boston, that said the brain was like a muscle. Use it or lose it. That phrase stuck with me. Use it or lose it. I started doing things differently. I'd always been a reader, but I read the same kinds of things. Newspapers, mysteries, westerns. I started reading philosophy, history, science, things that made my head hurt. I remember struggling through a book about quantum mechanics. Took me 4 months. I didn't understand half of it. But my brain felt different after, like I'd lifted something heavy. I started learning languages. Italian first, because Helen's family was Italian and I wanted to surprise her. Then German, then Portuguese. I wasn't fluent in any of them, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make my brain do something it didn't want to do. I took up chess, learned to play piano badly, started doing crossword puzzles every morning. The New York Times ones, the hard ones. Helen thought I was having some kind of midlife crisis. She asked me if I was happy. I said yes. She said then, "Why all this?" I told her about Albert. She went quiet. She started doing crosswords with me. I kept working until I was 72, retired in 1993. A lot of men I knew, they retired and just stopped reading, stopped learning, stopped doing anything that required effort. They watched television, played golf, waited. My friend Leonard worked with me for 19 years. He retired 6 months before I did. I'd visit him. He'd be sitting in front of the TV. Game shows, soap operas, didn't matter. I'd ask him what he was watching. He'd say he didn't know, he just had it on. Leonard died at 78. The last year he didn't recognize his own son. Another man, Victor Chen, he lived 3 houses down from us. Retired at 65 from the post office. 27 years carrying mail. Victor bought a boat. He was so excited about that boat. He and his wife Anne were going to sail down the coast, see the country from the water. The boat sat in his driveway for 3 years, never touched it. I asked him once why he didn't take it out. He said he was too tired. He was 68. Victor's mind started going at 74. By 77, he needed full-time care. I watched this happen over and over. Men and women who stopped challenging themselves, stopped learning, stopped being curious, and their minds just dimmed, like a light on a dimmer switch, slowly turning down. Helen and I kept at it. We traveled, took classes at the community college, history, art, literature. We were in our 70s, sitting in classrooms with 20-year-olds. Some of them looked at us like we were lost. We didn't care. We started learning ballroom dancing when I was 76. Helen had always wanted to. It was hard. My body didn't move the way it used to, but learning the steps, remembering the patterns, it lit something up in my head. Helen died when I was 87. Heart attack in her sleep. We'd been married 63 years. I thought that would be it for me. I thought without Helen I'd just fade. A lot of men do. They lose their wives and 6 months later they're gone too. I almost let that happen. For about 3 months I barely left the house. I stopped reading, stopped doing puzzles, stopped everything. I'd sit in the chair Helen used to sit in, and I'd just stare. My daughter Rachel came to visit. She found me like that. She sat down across from me and she said, "Dad, Mom wouldn't want this." I said, "I know." She said, "So what are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer. She came back the next day with a stack of books, history books, science books, a novel. She put them on the table and she said, "Start with one." I started with one. It took a few weeks, but something shifted. I started doing the crosswords again. Started going to the library. Started learning Spanish because I'd never learned Spanish, and it felt like something Helen would have liked. I joined a book club at the senior center. 8 of us, meeting every Tuesday. We read everything, fiction, nonfiction, poetry. We argued about books like they mattered, because they did. I was 93 when I started learning to use a computer. My grandson taught me. It took months. I wanted to quit every other day, but I kept at it. Now I read the news online. I email my grandchildren. I play chess against people in other countries. I watch lectures on YouTube about history, science, philosophy, things I never would have had access to before. I'm not special. I'm not naturally gifted. I'm just someone who decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to let my mind rot. But here's the thing I need you to understand. It's not about doing puzzles. It's not about learning languages or playing chess or reading books. Those are just tools. It's about staying uncomfortable. Your brain doesn't grow when you do things you already know how to do. It grows when you struggle, when you fail, when you feel stupid and keep going anyway. I see people my daughter's age, she's 76, and they've already stopped. They watch the same shows, read the same kinds of books if they read at all, talk about the same things, have the same conversations. They think they're relaxing. They think they've earned the right to coast. They're dying. They just don't know it yet. There's a man here named William. He's 89. He was a surgeon. Worked until he was 74. Brilliant man. Now he spends his days watching cable news. The same stories over and over. I asked him last month if he'd read any good books lately. He said he couldn't focus on books anymore. He couldn't focus because he stopped trying. There's a woman named Dorothy, 92. She does the same word search puzzle book over and over. The same puzzles. She knows where all the words are. She just circles them again. I asked her why she doesn't try something harder. She said this is what she likes. She's disappearing and she doesn't even see it. I'm not saying everyone who gets dementia could have prevented it. That's not true. Some of it is genetics, chemistry, luck. My mother did crosswords every day of her life and still lost her mind at 81. But I've lived long enough to see the pattern. The people who stay sharp are the people who stay curious, who keep learning, who keep doing things that make them feel like beginners. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self to start sooner, to not wait until I watched Albert stare out that window, to not waste years doing the same comfortable things over and over. What I didn't understand then was that the brain is either growing or shrinking. There's no maintenance mode. You're either challenging it or losing it. I would have learned more languages, taken more classes, read more books outside my comfort zone, traveled more, not for relaxation, but for disorientation, for the feeling of not knowing where I am or what to do next. I would have told Helen sooner. We would have started together earlier. What I wish someone had told me when I was 40, 50, 60 is that retirement isn't the end of learning. It should be the beginning. You finally have time. Time to study things you were always curious about. Time to be a student again. But most people retire into comfort, into routine, into the same day repeated until the days stop meaning anything. Your brain needs novelty. It needs challenge. It needs to fail and recover and fail again. I'm 104. I'm reading a book right now about the history of mathematics. I don't understand most of it. That's the point. Last week I started learning a little bit of Mandarin, just basics. Hello, thank you, numbers. My tongue doesn't work the way it used to. The sounds are hard. I feel ridiculous. I'm going to keep going. I know I don't have much time left. Maybe a year, maybe 5 if I'm lucky. My body is failing in all the predictable ways. My knees are gone. My hearing is mostly gone. I need help getting dressed, but my mind is still mine. I can still think, still learn, still be surprised by things, still have conversations that matter. That's not luck, that's choice. A choice I made over and over for 67 years. If this meant something to you, I'm glad I told you. I don't know how many more of these I'll be able to do. There are books that helped me. The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doidge. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. They're all worth your time. If you want to leave a thought, I'd like to hear it. What are you learning? What are you struggling with? What makes you feel like a beginner? There are more stories like this here if you want them. I won't be around forever to tell them. I'm 104 years old. I'm sitting in a small room facing a parking lot. I'm tired most of the time now, but my mind is still sharp, and I'm grateful for that every single day. I hope yours stays sharp too.